Very nice.
Okay. Now I think we're good.
And here's Fred.
Yeah.
Hi, Fred.
I'm gonna
We
stick on the end here for one.
So I was sitting there at the.
We haven't called the order yet, so you're just in time.
Okay.
But we are being recorded already.
Wherever you like, Fred.
Looks like someone's there.
No, someone's
Tom.
still on the seat.
Oh, Tom.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
All right, so why don't we get started? Brian, we're all okay tech-wise?
I think so.
Excellent. All right, so let's call to order the meeting of the Village of Shorewood Hills Finance Committee. Today is Monday, June 22nd. The time is 7:02. Brian, will you call the roll?
Sure. Fred Wade,
Are here?
Underculper,
Yes.
might be mispronouncing, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Liz Heiner,
Here.
Sean Cody.
Here.
Gloria Beach,
Here.
Kate Crowley,
Here.
and Mark Liver.
Here. Brian, has the meeting been properly posted?
It has.
Excellent. Okay, the first order of business is the consideration approval of the minutes of January 22nd. 26th, excuse me. Anyone care to make a motion to approve those minutes? And then if it's seconded, we'll have a discussion. Who makes a motion? Sean makes a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll
Liz
second.
seconds that motion. Any discussion, comments, questions with respect to the minutes? Gloria,
I have several. So first, let's take care of the typos. So January 26, 2026 on the header.
Yeah.
Item number 6 in the paragraph, about fourth from the bottom, it says they discussed rather the TIDs, the TIDs were eligible. I'm thinking it should be they discussed whether the TIDs were eligible. Next typo, actually a couple. Item number 7, final sentence. The thought was that, I think is what it wants to say, but also the rest of that. I think it was that sentence. No, there's another sentence in there that was kind of mangled. It wasn't that one. It was another one that I did not highlight. However, what I wanted to say is that I object to these minutes as written, specifically because of item number 8. So in item number 8, it says he also stated, that would be Mark. Mark also stated that he was disappointed that the Board of Trustees did not want to pursue the information presented about considering merging the municipal court with another municipality. I don't object to that. I remember you saying that, Mark. What I do object to is the next sentence. Members agree that all potential solutions should be investigated thoroughly to close, oh, there's the mangled sentence, to close the help reduce the projected future deficits. So the sentence is mangled, but I also object just on the premise of that, because I know for sure that I did not agree that the municipal court should be considered for closure. In fact, I remember saying a couple times now that the board last year or early, the board voted, I think it was January 21st, the board voted to not continue with this line of deficit reduction or just, I'm really mangling it myself. The board voted on this. And Brian Mooney was instructed by the board to not continue pursuing this. And I object to the sentence saying that the members of this body concurred that closing out the municipal court and blending it with another municipality should be considered an open option. I did not agree to it. And I don't think that the finance committee as a body should be represented as having agreed to this.
Why don't we just strike that sentence?
Excellent.
Okay. And guys, any other changes?
Just the obvious of the date header. 2026. I find at least my copy is 20256.
Got it. Any other proposed changes, modifications to the minutes? Hearing none, will you, you made the motion, Sean,
Yep.
will you,
Make a motion.
amend your motion
Yes,
to,
with the-
as changes as presented?
With recommended changes.
I will second.
And seconds that. Brian, are you good with all that stuff, catching up on it?
Yep.
Okay, so ready to vote? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hand or say aye. Motion
As
carries.
amended, yes.
Okay. Let's move on to the next piece of business. I want to just acknowledge and welcome Fred and Tom to the meeting. Much appreciated your stepping up to help us out at a time when we're going to be extremely busy in the coming year. And it's great to have you aboard. I want to say on that subject, Brad, are you prepared to make your little further down in the agenda? But the suggestion has been made to move you up. Are you prepared to make your presentation now?
Yes, yes, I am.
Fantastic. Why don't we do that? We'll go ahead and begin Brad's presentation, which is item 9A, 2026 financing plan. Brad,
Okay.
you're up.
Thank you. Is it all right if I share my screen?
Please.
Yes.
Okay.
Could you either adjust the volume for him or he could speak up more?
Yeah, maybe.
Is that all right, maybe? We're
Okay,
fixing
I
the
can-
volume.
How's the volume now? Good?
Please.
We're working on it still. Keep on talking.
Okay. Are you seeing my screen at this point with the presentation on it?
No, we don't see your screen.
How about now?
No.
Maybe I don't have access to share. I'm not sure. Let's see. Sorry about the technical problems here on my side. Just give me 1 second. There. Are you seeing the presentation now on the screen?
Yeah. See
Okay.
you can see agenda for the finance committee, but we can't see your presentation.
Oh, okay. Let me switch this
We're
then.
still hearing you. Maybe
I'm gonna try changing the speaker.
we're gonna change. Brian Mooney is doing something on our end.
Okay.
But we see the presentation now, so that's great.
Okay. I shifted the presentation to a different screen, so that's why you're
Well
seeing.
done.
Okay. Do you want me just to wait for a minute for the adjustments that Brian's making, or should I get started?
What do you think? Is that
Get
good?
started.
Better.
I think it's
Yeah.
great.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone. I'll go ahead and get started on this presentation. The purpose of this presentation is really to provide an overview of the village's bond rating, and then to also talk about the process that was employed last year to develop the financing plan for 2025, and then also to lay out sort of next steps that if the committee decides to issue in 2026, what a timetable might look like for an issuance. So I just wanted to start by some observations regarding the village's bond rating. Shorewood Hills has a AAA rating by Standard & Poor's, and that's the highest bond rating that Standard & Poor's assigns. So the next category of ratings below AAA is AA, and within the AA, there's AA plus, AA, and AA minus. And then the next level of ratings below AA is A. And again, there'd be A plus, A, and A minus, and the ratings continue down from there. Shorewood Hills has had a AAA rating for a very long time now, and it puts the village in a really unique position, an elite position compared to issuers really nationwide. There just aren't a lot of AAA rated entities. I just put together a few comments here that are also highlighted in the report. There's really never just one item that causes triggers a AAA or secures that AAA. And just like there's really not only one item that might have the village lose a AAA rating. In a broad sense, there's 4 categories that Standard & Poor's evaluates when assigning bond ratings. It's the finances of the village, the debt of the village, socioeconomic factors, and financial policies and management and governance of the village. So within those 4 broad categories, there's a number of subcategories that are really looked at a pretty granular level. Some of the highlights in the most recent report, which was back from 2022, so that's the last time that the village has talked to Standard & Poor's and had a rating assigned to a debt issue. But those highlights leading to the AAA was budgetary performance, liquidity, financial management and policies, the reserves, that is the fund balance of the village, and a manageable debt burden with the rapid amortization. The report also specifically calls out factors which may lead to a downgrade in the rating. And that would be an overall really 2 thresholds here: a reduction in fund balance, or certainly a reduction below a $500,000 threshold. Violations of board policies and significant turnover of key village officials. All of these factors together, could be cause for a rating downgrade. The estimated impact, first of all, in my opinion, the village would still have market access. You wouldn't be, you wouldn't be unable to issue debt. So, but with a downgrade to a bond rating, you pay higher interest rates in any given market. So the estimated impact, potential impact of a 1-notch downgrade, so going from AAA to AA+, would have interest rates higher by 15 to 25 basis points on new issues. So that's 0.15% to 0.25% higher rates. In dollars, if we assume a 10-year financing, or 10 to 15-year financing, that's $1 about $7,300 to $15,600 for each additional $1 million issued. The bond rating change would not impact the village's payments on its outstanding obligations, because those are all fixed rate. It would impact the value of the bonds and notes that are held by the investors, but it doesn't impact the village's payments on the bonds or notes that are outstanding. I've included the full rating report. And again, this is from March of 2022. Some of the important highlighted sections were summarized earlier in the presentation. But there's very specific here saying that any rating pressure that arises would most likely occur as a result of poor budgetary performance, a reduction in reserves with levels considered nominally low, or a weaker liquidity position. And then some of the positives, here's the strong management policies and practices, very strong reserves, in compliance with formal policies that have been adopted by the village board, manageable debt burden, rapid amortization, that is a rapid repayment of that debt. And then on the next page, there is a stable outlook on the current rating, but the downside scenario is we could see negative rating action if there's weakening budgetary flexibility or liquidity levels no longer consistent with other AAA entities. In addition, if the village were to draw down its general fund reserves to less than $500,000, that would most likely trigger a bond rating downgrade. There's a section here where S&P specifically calls out the past practice of the village to adopt a long-term capital improvement plan, 5 to 7 years, with updates annually. And then on the next page, they're talking about the stability of the finances based on current policy of the village. So that I won't walk through the entire report, but those are really the highlights. So if we take a look what happened back in 2025, I just want to walk through the process that or the debt issuance that took place. First, there were multiple meetings with the Finance Committee. I think at least 3 meetings where we talked in a lot of detail about financing plans and capital improvement planning. On the next page, I have the plan that was ultimately recommended for the issuance for the 2025 notes. However, multiple scenarios were developed. So ultimately, last year, the Finance Committee recommended that the 2025 notes be issued to fund capital projects. But the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan that was drafted, and there were actually 2 versions at one point, that was not recommended for adoption. And then ultimately, the board authorized the issuance of the 2025 notes, but the board did not adopt the CIP. The projects that were funded with the 2025 borrowing, just in general terms, $885,000 of levy-supported projects. There was $75,000 for pool projects, which that portion of the financing is anticipated to be paid by pool revenue. And then $175,000 for water enterprise projects. That would be paid from water revenues and revenues from the water enterprise. Although it was not approved, the 2026 financing had placeholders for $1 million of facilities that would be levy supported. Now, and part of the discussion with both the committee and the board is the village never really drilled down to say exactly what facilities that would fund. $1,510,000 of levy supported projects that are non-facility related, and then $925,000 for the pool. That pool, the pool revenues are insufficient to support that $925,000 of new debt. So this pool portion was modeled out as levy supported, not supported by the pool revenues, as opposed to the pool project for the 2025. The anticipation is that it would be supported by pool revenues. Now, the next 2 pages.
Brad or Mark, can I jump in with a question on that last slide? Is that okay if are we asking questions as we go, or should I wait till the end?
Go ahead, Kate.
Okay, thank you. Brad, or maybe it's a question for Mark. I recall that the Finance Committee recommended and the board adopted a 2026 CIP, just not the 5-year CIP. So I think we do have an adopted CIP for 2026. Is that consistent with anybody else's recollection?
That's correct. We did adopt the CIP and incorporate it in the 2026 budget, which is, as I recall, is about $3.5 billion in total, something on that order of magnitude. Board has not taken any action with respect to the projects, or much less the financing. But I think the reason why I've asked Brad to come today is to raise this issue before the board acts, so to refresh the committee's memory as to the process that we go through and what some of the issues are likely to be. Is that it, Kate? Is there anything else, or should we turn it back to Brad?
Nope, that's it. I just wanted to make sure we all knew we did have a CIP for the year that we're currently operating under.
Okay.
Brad, continue.
Oh, so this was the financing plan that was presented and approved last year for 2025. Just as a reminder how to read this left column is levy supported existing debt payments, so existing principal and interest payments. Then next to that is the 2025 issue, and I'm detailing separate amortization schedules for the broad groups of projects, so levy supported projects, pool revenue, and water revenue. As a placeholder down on the bottom of this page, essentially in a footnote, we're showing future financings for 27, 29, 30, and 34, and the assumptions used for those for that modeling is detailed. So assumptions in terms of the repayment period of either 10 years or 20 years, and the assumptions on interest rates that were used. So this is the 2026 issue then that we had that was presented, $3,435,000. And this again is the breakout of the projects I previously went through. The future issues, debt service, I didn't show as much detail for all the future issues, but there is detail behind this output. The future principal and interest payments are modeled in this column. So when we get to combined debt service, that reflects the existing levy supported debt, the 25, the 26 issue, and the other future issues in the CIP, or in what was the draft CIP that was footnoted on the previous page. The goal that we were really striving for is to maintain a relatively consistent debt service budget. So in this boxed in area, you'll see we have annual increases to debt service, but what we've avoided is having peaks and valleys, or having the debt service drop from say 1.1 million down to 400,000 or 500,000 in a year, and then spike back up to 1.1, 1.2 million. So we're trying to keep the debt service relatively uniform. And then the different boxed and colored in areas just show different steps in the debt service payments. As a reminder, we've only modeled out debt. The last debt issuance year in this model is 2034. So I don't think I wouldn't want you to focus necessarily on this column here and look at 1,388,000 and say, great, our debt's going to level off and it's actually going to drop. Well, presumably in 2035 or 36 or in the future, there would be additional areas, projects layered in. So the reason where the drop is here is really to allow the feathering in, or the layering in of the new debt out into the future. And then there's a series of graphs that really takes everything that we went through with all of the numbers, and for people who prefer the visual representation, this graph shows the levy supported principal and interest. Your formal policy says that won't exceed 25% of your operating levy, your operating and levy supported debt service. So this is just that calculation. The dashed line represents that 25%. You'll see in most years we're within policy. There's a couple years we peak just a little bit above policy, but of course this would be updated year after year based on then current financials and the current budget. An informal but a policy, or an unwritten but a practice of the village, is to have outstanding principal not exceed 75% of what's statutorily allowed, and then you're well within that policy. Outstanding principal is in the dark green, policy is the top line here. Then there's a couple of graphs that shows debt service levy. And remember, any of these levy amounts, it's just debt service. We're not building in your operating levy. This is just isolating the debt by itself. So if there's no future debt issued, this green bar is, or the green line represents what happens to the debt service levy. It drops off pretty quickly. By 2038, the final payment is made. However, the top line represents the existing debt plus future issues. And that's where I'm talking about, we try to keep this relatively stable, avoiding peaks and valleys, allow room for future debt to be layered in out here in the future. And then the same levy supported debt. This is broken apart by future issuance. So sort of this peach colored line represents the existing obligations. And then the other bars that are stacked on top represents future annual or future periodic issues. So potential next steps and a potential timeline to put out, put this in mainly for discussion or information. If the committee and the board decide to issue debt in 2026, you could start working on what types of projects you want to include with that, or to finance with that debt. That could be, for example, July and August, and then develop and adopt the forward-looking CIP, the 2027 through 2031 CIP, again, July and August. We would evaluate financing scenarios to fund not only the 26, but ideally to have a plan in place for the longer term CIP. Those scenarios could be evaluated August and September, or August or September. And then if there is a 26 financing, you could have a resolution adopted in October to authorize the issuance for the 2026 notes. Again, in the longer term CIP, that could also be adopted in October. That doesn't commit the village to any specific financing in 27 through 31, but it is, it's a planning document, essentially a budgeting document. And then the issuance and closing of any 2026 financing could take place in late October. That would provide enough time to get the impact of that financing into your 2027 budget, which would be adopted or considered probably in November. And it gives enough time to include any debt payments that need to be submitted to Department of Revenue on the levy limit exemption or levy limit worksheet, and that's due in mid-December. So issuing and closing in late October puts us, really where you would need to be in order to have a debt issuance completed by the end of year. So that's the broad, the overview I wanted to provide. I can go into more details or answer questions.
Questions for Brad from the committee? Gloria?
I had a couple questions. I just wanted to thank you, Brad, for your presentation. I just wanted to wait until you were finished to ask my questions to see if maybe they were being answered as we went along. So going back to, for example, one of the questions I had was regarding the highlights of this S&P report. But you answered that those highlights were made by you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Then I made my own highlights in that report, and on page 4 of your report, the Standard & Poor's ratings direct, it says underneath strong financial management practices and policies aid in careful fiscal planning. And it said Sherwood Hills board reviews detailed budget to actual reports for all line items in each fund monthly, and the budget can be amended when needed. It also says the village has a comprehensive investment management policy, invests in the state local government investment pool, and updates its board monthly regarding the pool. So that's a question more for Mark, because I don't recall these reports.
They were regularly delivered to the board in 2025, and previously you'll find in pretty much, I think, every board monthly packet a report along these lines. But in 2026, the staff, and we're going to talk about that more today, the staff has just not been able to do it. Has not had the time, has had higher priorities, and we're going to get into this issue as we finish up with Brad here. But
Okay.
our internal operations are quite limited right now.
I would like to suggest that those reports, I don't remember them being in 2025, but when they are re-implemented, I would like to suggest that it's appropriate that they comes to the finance committee as well. The next page about the city took out, next page underneath the highlight manageable debt burden with rapid amortization. So I noted the rapid amortization on your schedules, Brad. The city also took out short-term bank loans in 2019, 2020 in the amount of $50,000 and $100,000 respectively for capital expenditures such as copy machines, vehicle purchases. Officials report that they are moving away from this practice and are considering a levy referendum to help fund these types of capital items. So who is officials? Is that the board? Is that Sharon?
I don't know at this point.
Okay, because I was wondering,
this is going back
this
to
is like, 2022.
It's-
So that's the
yeah.
question to you, Brad, is the report that you're showing us is from 2022 and it's very comprehensive.
Mhm.
How often does Standard & Poor's update?
So anytime there's a new debt issuance that we request a rating, Standard & Poor's will provide an update. We typically have a conference call with the analyst at Standard & Poor's, and Brian would be on that call. I would be involved in the call. If a committee member wanted to join, they could. but there has not been a new rating assigned since 2022 because we didn't do an open market issue at all that would have necessitated a rating. The last couple of issues you did were really private placements. There was a state trust fund loan, there was a bank loan last year, and those we don't have to get ratings. Now, Standard & Poor's does provide periodic surveillance of the village, but that's all done by, it's by AI, really. It's harvesting data from your audited financials once those are posted. If there would be any red flags picked up in those financials, before taking any action, an analyst would reach out to me, and then we would coordinate a call with Brian, and we would answer their questions. That so far there has not been any changes to the rating.
Okay, thank you for that. My question now is going to page 12, the bar chart, where you're looking at the formal debt policy and the policy of P&I not exceeding 25%. So we've talked about this before. I'm the one who doesn't like to see it go above that. But in the past, you've said, well, you don't know what you don't know. So, for example, we don't know what inflation is going to do. We don't know what interest rates are going to do. Insofar as the debt policy, but those are all externalities. So my question to you is, if we are kind of updating this as we go, to make sure that we're within our 25% policy, but the externalities are what's driving whether or not we're below our 25%, what recourse do we have when we're projecting that next year? So, for example, here it shows it's projecting 2028. It looked to me 2028 through 2032, it would surpass the 25%. When it's driven by externalities, what recourse do we have to adjust so that we don't flow through our 25% policy?
Yeah, I've always been more concerned on the next, say, 4 or 5 years, and because the further out in time we're projecting, the less confidence we can have in the accuracy of the projections. So if I was seeing this blowing through policy this was modeled in 25. If it would have showed me in 26, we're at 110%, for example, that would raise more concerns to me than say, in 5 years, we're going to be 0.4% above policy, because that's such a narrow margin. So I think
that makes a lot of sense.
Options the committee would have to sort of address that, though, is frankly, we could talk about adjusting your policy, right? There's no 25% isn't mandated by Standard & Poor's, or it's not even necessarily a best practice. So you could say, as a village, are we comfortable with 30%? And now you'll have even more of a cushion, in that metric. Now, it's not, policy should be long-term, right? So it's not that we should be adjusting policies every year to react to a budget, but that would be one option the village would have.
Okay, thank you. That actually answers very nicely the question. The next question I have is on page 14. So levy supported debt service tax rate. So in here, I can see what you're doing, like with the blue bar. It's the existing plus 2024 issuance. But why is there a distinction between existing versus existing plus 2024?
Back in 24, so there was a state trust fund state trust fund loan outstanding that had a balloon payment associated with it. So it was skewing your debt. So what we did in 2024 is we refinanced a portion of that balloon payment to smooth out the debt payment. So that blue line is really a carryover from a presentation that was a couple of years ago. I could actually remove it at this point, and we could just use one colored line that says existing plus all future. The line wouldn't change, just the coloring.
The last question I have is on page 17. It says Baird is acting for its own interests. Does that mean you do not act as a fiduciary?
Right now, Baird isn't engaged as either a municipal advisor or underwriter with the village. So everything I'm providing here is information only. So in this specific respect, Right, Baird does not have a fiduciary responsibility. Baird does have to act fairly and, but it doesn't raise to the level of fiduciary. Now,
Okay,
if the village would like to engage Baird as municipal advisor, then we would have a fiduciary responsibility.
okay. So when we engage Baird to do an issuance, are you then acting as fiduciary?
For the last couple of issues, Baird was engaged as underwriter, and it really had to do with the direct market access to investors. When Baird is engaged as underwriter, it's an arm's length commercial transaction, so not a fiduciary. If Baird were
Gotcha.
engaged as municipal advisor, then I would have a fiduciary responsibility.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you a lot for your presentation and answering my questions.
Sure.
Other questions from committee members for Brad? Liz?
Brad, in terms of, you've seen our policies, is there anything about our policies that would cause concern from S&P or any in reviewing it?
No, I think you have very good policies, and S&P frankly calls out your policies as one of the credit factors for the AAA rating.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Brad at this point? Seeing none, are we ready to move on to the next agenda item? Thank you very much, Brad.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
All right,
Okay, bye.
so let us then return to the agenda and specifically to item 7, status report, village finance director, treasurer recruitment, and interim staffing. So I wanted to do a little bit of deep dive at this meeting to help the finance committee understand where we are from a financial operations point of view. Because we're extremely short-staffed, that presents some real challenges in both doing the routine things as well as going above that, beyond that. And financial planning, we know we have the budget coming up, we know we have the CIP coming up, the update to the financial management plan. All that planning effort has to go on. But at the same time, we still have to make sure the staff gets paid. We still need to make sure accounts payable is done. Still need to make sure we're in compliance with our internal controls. So there's a lot going on here. And I just wanted to sensitize the committee to what those challenges are and when we might be able to move beyond them. So Ryan, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of start us off with the recruitment issue, and then we will turn to internal operations.
Sure. Thanks, Ron.
Yep.
So late last week, the panel that was assembled to conduct the finance director recruitment alongside me met and able to go through the list of the applications that the village received. We received over 10 interested applicants for the position. We have since narrowed that down to a group of finalists. And to begin the process of the interviews with the finalists on Thursday morning this week, with the final review of all the remaining applicants on Monday. So we're hoping to have this wrapped up relatively quickly thereafter. The goal, I think, would be to have something in place with a formal offer to the candidate that's chosen, selected as the top applicant, sometime before the close of next week. So we work with Public Administration Associates, who's leading this recruitment, to draft up a contract with myself. And then we will hopefully be able to present that, clear all background checks and everything, and have an offer hopefully submitted and possibly a date ironed out before the end of this calendar month. As far as the interim staffing situation goes, ironically, we had a meeting in the village office today with Kristen Snyder, who is fulfilling the interim finance director role at this time, and her colleague Tim Allen, who has been working remotely assisting the village in doing some bank reconciliations for the completion of the village audit, which we just got through about 2 weeks ago. So they were working on and ensuring that Christie had all the knowledge and understanding of what it is that she needs to do to fulfill the backlog pertaining to the 2026 bank reconciliations. So she will be working on that moving forward for the duration of this month and next month. Tim has graciously offered to remain on call as needed, even though the intent was to sort of keep him on board until the audit was completed. But he did say he is available if need be to assist or step in to help answer any questions Christie might encounter. As of this moment in time, aside from a pre-planned vacation that Christie had around the 4th of July, the intent is to hopefully keep her on board with the village through the end of July. Tim on call again as needed. And then hopefully that can coincide with a hopeful board date of the selected finance director, either shortly thereafter or even possibly a brief overlap. So there can be some in-person institutional knowledge transfer between Christie and the new selected individual. So we should probably be out of the interim staffing situation by the end of July. But I'd be remiss in not stating that it has been immensely helpful in stabilizing operations during this time of transition in the village admin office. And both Christie and Tim have done an awesome job in keeping us afloat and keeping us current to the best of their ability. So we'd be more pleased with it.
So, so we're really down to 3 administrative staff, none of which have financial training, so to speak. The work is really being carried forward by Aline right now, who's our administrative services coordinator's her title, but she was formerly a clerk in Monona. So she's really wearing 3 hats right now. She is our clerk, so to speak. She's also our administrative services coordinator. And oh, by the way, she's also doing payroll and AP. And it's a bit much. And it's quite concerning to me. Our backlog continues to grow. We haven't done any bank recs for 2026. None of the accounts have been reconciled. The focus up to now has been completing the field work for the 2025 audit. I understand the field work has been done. We do not have the audit report from Baker Tilly yet. I hope we will have that at the July board meeting. I hope it will be presented by then, if not before. But because of the need to complete the field work, there's been no really bookkeeping reporting activity with respect to all the transactions which have occurred in 2026, such as payroll and accounts payable and the like. So it's really left us behind the 8 ball in terms of financial reporting. If you don't have the data in the system, you can't produce the reports. And that's why, going back to your earlier comment, Gloria, about the variances reports, the comparative reports for revenues and expenses, which have been delivered to the trustees monthly in 2025 and preceding years, has not appeared in the trustee packet because the data isn't there to support the numbers. Quite a concerning situation for me. And I think one of the issues Brian and I have been talking about is, do we need to throw yet more resources at this problem so that we can make some faster progress on the backlog, which really quite concerns me, because I don't want our financial director to come in here and all of a sudden the first responsibility is doing bank recs and doing that kind of bookkeeping work. We really need to focus them. When they get aboard here in July, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, we have this whole planning process that Brad just outlined, the budgets, the CIP, the financing, and so on, where we really need the financial director treasurer their experience and their training to work in those higher level activities, as well as financial management reporting, as opposed to the more mundane things. So one of the things Brian and I are talking about is, do we need to make sure that not only Christie stays on, but also that Tim stays on to continue to do bank reconciliations for us to reduce the level of that backlog. And so when we have our financial director, treasurer here, they can focus on these other activities. But it's quite concerning, and it should be. I think we need to be able to get back to where we were, and I would hope that we get beyond that. I mean, one of the things that did appear in the board packets prior to 2026 was this comparative revenues and expenses report, which basically on a monthly basis and a year-to-date basis showed us where actual was compared to budget and where actual was compared to prior year. And that was very helpful. But we didn't have any balance sheet reporting. Julie had begun work on that, but had not had time to finish that. And when I talk about balance sheet reporting, I'm talking about things as simple as, if you will, the cash balances in all the funds on a monthly basis. These are things that need to be addressed. They need to be addressed much sooner rather than later, and particularly given the planning environment that's going to be kicking up very soon, we really need to get on this and find a way to work around it. Lori, you have your hand up.
Yes. So I joined the finance committee in 2022, August 2022. And I recall it was probably January is what I want to say, January 2023. I recall a meeting at which it was raised that the bank had not been bank records statements had not been reconciled. And I remember that the answer I been given as to when that was a little bit evasive. And I went home and I thought, oh my God, that was kind of a neat trick. And then the next time I came back, I said, okay, can you tell me, was it reconciled in this month? Was it reconciled in that? I remember Sharon was hot. She was mad that I did that. But through that sort of asking, it came to my understanding that the bank book hadn't been reconciled, the statements hadn't been reconciled for a full year. And that Baker Tilly had been hired to reconcile the books. So I'm really having a hard time understanding how, until last year, you guys were getting all these statements when that entire year, the statements hadn't been reconciled. How in the world were you getting any kind of information where you just said that until everything went to hell in a handbasket this year, every month you've gotten these? How is that even possible?
Well, first of all, they've all been caught up through the end of 2025, and they'll all be current with respect to 2025, which is a precondition for the audit. So we're currently there. But the problem has been historically, we only have a single finance person. And often in the past, we've had no people with financial training on staff. I mean, Koki was the exception.
That's
She
my
had been.
question. My question is, no, but that was.
You're interrupting me.
Interrupting you.
Okay.
Because that wasn't my question.
I continue.
Can you answer my question?
I continue.
If you will answer my question, yes, go.
Otherwise, I can't.
Well,
You
you
know what I mean?
don't answer, no, it feels like you just kind of just little weaving thing and everything's awful,
I think
everything's
the committee
awful.
needs to understand the background. We have had, I would concede, we have had a historically a problem in staying current.
Yes.
Okay, because we've often had no financial staff member. We've had people that have done financial work for us based on some limited training, but they didn't have degrees in accounting. They didn't have the kind of deep experience. And so not surprisingly, we got behind and sometimes severely behind. Okay, that's
actually
the reality of it.
That answers my question. I appreciate that. And the
Okay.
point is really that it's not just this year.
No, it
That's
isn't
been an
just
issue.
this year.
This
And
has
when
been
we-
a long going.
It is a
problem.
long-standing problem and it needs to be addressed. And that's why it's important when we bring on the new financial director and treasurer, that we kind of get our backlog caught up using the temporary staff, Christie and Tim. We need a sustainable solution. And I'm afraid that just bringing the financial director and treasurer on will not be the sustainable solution because issues arise. And the financial director, Julie in the past, gets diverted. They wear many hats. She got heavily involved in open records requests, whatever other issues and fires had to be put out. And when that happens, the area that doesn't get addressed is we fall behind on the regular accounting and bookkeeping, and we can't do that anymore. We shouldn't do that anymore. So we got to put out the fires, but as soon as we put out the fires and we get this treasurer hired, we need to think about how are we going to back up that person? Because if that person is gone, if that person is unable to do the financial work that we hired them to do because we need them to deal with something else, then we're going to fall behind again. And this is how we got into the situation.
So that actually is, leads into the next question I had. You said that Aileen is currently doing our payroll, but not Christie.
No, she is. Christie is doing the back end of the finishing of the payroll entries that Aline is managing up front. And Christie does the exchange portion that Julie fulfilled for like the ETF.
So she's actually executing the transactions,
Correct.
but Aileen is actually doing the number input into the payroll software.
And I think that's true with respect to AP as well.
Okay, so then Aileen is staff doing entry, and then Christie is executing the transactions.
Correct.
Okay.
So,
And so when Christie came on, 2025 banks still need to be reconciled. How far back?
At the time that she came on, to say somewhere September, October, I think that it was still needing to be.
Okay, so right around when Logic kind of blew up everything. So Logic is the gift that just keeps on giving.
So
Liz.
are you asking the finance committee then to make a recommendation to the board to get staffing in, to get us back up?
I think I'm concerned that even when we get caught up here using outside assistance, we will fall behind again.
So is it
It's
a
a structural problem, and I think the board will need to address it. And I think the finance committee will need to weigh in. So this meeting would be an opportunity to bring the committee up to speed as to what the current situation is. And then hopefully in July, we will return to this issue because this may be a budget issue of 2020, possibly a 2026 budget, but almost certainly a 2027 budget issue.
So are we looking then at I don't know, Brian, a full-time person, a part-time person? What are we looking at? And forgive me, I don't understand it. Are Christie and Tim, are they, they're not regular staff then?
They're temps.
They're temps, okay.
But Christie's working full time.
She's working full time, but she's interim, she's temp, she's outside agency. She's not permanent staff.
Okay.
Right.
But, so are we talking full-time or part-time or?
I don't know that Brian knows that yet, right?
Yeah, I don't anticipate, let me say it like this, I don't anticipate us gaining the budgetary flexibility to bring somebody up. Just don't.
You know, the problem is, you're reading the paper about how village clerks have taken, if we're not balancing our books, how do we know what's going on?
Yeah. How do you make decisions?
Well, or if the money's really there.
Right.
It's right for stealing? I mean, it sounds like, I think when we say the budget isn't there, it seems to me something else might have to go. But the budget has to be there for this.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah, and part of the problem would be as the staff starts to prepare the 2027 budget, as they will do in the ensuing weeks. They'll have 2025 as a point of reference, because we'll have gone through the audit and have the final statements for 25, and they can work from that. But I'm concerned they won't know the year-to-date 26 numbers to work with as well, and they really should have both in
Because-
terms of compiling their budgets for 2027.
because we don't have 2025 numbers, right? We do.
I mean,
Well-
there are 2025 numbers in the system. I've run 2025 reports and looked at them. The staff has run them for me and I've examined them. There are some entries that I have some questions on, but more to the point, Baker Tilly has not signed off yet.
But we
So
don't
we
have
are
an
waiting.
actual 2025. and
That's because the budgets, or the Baker Tilly hasn't signed off on it.
But I,
Right. So we can produce reports internally, but since we don't have Baker Tilly sign off yet, we don't know what adjusting entries may occur between now and whenever that report is issued.
and that's normal for this timing.
And that's what,
Is is it normal for us not to know this as of June after the end of the
you
year?
know, in,
Don't we normally have it
in
early?
prior years, and I won't say all years, but it's more that we would have preliminary numbers in as early as February, late February, and by March, we can get a report. When we have the
The
staff
staff to
and
do
the
it.
staff can focus on what they need to do, we can turn it around much faster. But if anything intervenes, as has happened, if we have staff turnover, this is the result. It gets pushed out to May, June, and in this case, it appears to be July.
So my experience since 2022, I've never seen an audit completed before that.
That's a good question.
Sure.
So what is the line for doing requirements? What's the kind of date that we have to see? Have an audit.
From a statutory point of view, Brian, do you have a sense of that as you've been managed?
That would all be important. I would say that's very important. And what are the timelines? Absolutely.
And I don't know the answer to that question.
I think that could help kind of what in the interim, that's also.
I mean, my
Definitely a
concern right
budget.
now is the less statutory concern than just management concern. That even if the state says you could, fine, wait till, you turn it in by September, you'll be fine. That's not going to be fine with me, and I don't think it should be acceptable to anyone else. But I think we as a committee really need to think about what are the benchmarks that we want in terms of performance from the financial staff. Do we expect bank accounts to be reconciled within, say, 30 days after the end of the prior month?
Yes,
And if that's the
Yes.
standard,
yes.
we need
I
to
guess
set
I-
that standard so that then Brian can prepare a budget and a plan that says, oh, you set these benchmarks, and this is the budget that adheres to those benchmarks. Right now, we don't have those kind of benchmarks, nor do we have a budget that would allow us to perform what I think everyone wants in terms of far faster turnaround for bank reconciliations and for data entry into the system. So that's kind of where we are. So I wasn't going to pose the question to the committee tonight. This was more about education, but I will be back in July, and this will be the question, and it will be something that we'll need to make recommendations to the board so the board can make decisions. And having made those decisions, Brian can incorporate them in the budget.
And, but Mark, I think you heard from us. I don't think that we all think that that should happen. I think we need numbers to figure out, do we need a full-time person? Do we need a part-time? And how much is it gonna cost and what are we gonna do in the budget to make it come to be?
Yeah.
And I also just don't even understand how we can talk about going for, I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but going forward for a loan at the end of 2026, I don't see this in our time frame at all. I don't think it's doable. We're gonna have to have too much time spent on the budget. And we don't have, I mean, the thing from the S&P, part of it was that we had staff. We've had a complete turnover. I mean, if that's what you were really to look at us right now, we're in shambles.
Yeah. I think that's clearly the case. And so I think the immediate issue that Brian and I have been talking about is, for instance, Tim Allen, who Brian mentioned, who's been doing the bank reconciliations. He's willing to stay on, but I think as Brian looks at it, he says, well, where's the budget to bring Tim Allen on and to keep him on? And so that's the issue that's going to have to go to the board. Because it's not acceptable to me. I don't think it's going to be acceptable to any of you that we are so far behind. I mean,
It
it's
can
one
be
thing to
acceptable to
30
the
days,
board.
but we need to get caught up, and in order to do that, only realistic, as far as I can tell, way to do that is to bring in outside resources, people like Tim, to do that work for us. And I don't really want to bring on anybody else, because anybody you bring in, you have to train. And Christy and Tim have both been trained, not only professionally, but they also have the experience in having worked in the village and know what the village accounting standards are and how things get recorded. So those are the people that are in the best position to help us out right now. And we just need to keep them on so that we get current. And then the next issue is, okay, now that we're current, how do we stay current? And that, I don't think the answer to that can be bring in temporary help to make it happen. We need to find a permanent, sustainable solution to keeping ourselves reasonably current with respect to financial information and financial reporting. Boy,
Fred wanted to speak.
I agree. We've got to find a sustainable solution, but I also think that we have to accelerate this process any way we can. And if the board ought to be given an option to get more outside help if we have to in budget, it's just unacceptable not to be able to do all these functions.
no, I appreciate that. And I think I would be willing to bring more outside people in. The problem is they all require training as to the use of our system and the way we account for things and so on. So I think the best we can do right now is go back to people like Tim and say, yes, we want you to stay on. We want to continue as many free hours as you have. We want them, and we want you to focus on those bank recs and get us current. And with respect to Christy, to make sure she makes the other journal entries with respect to payables, with respect to payroll and so on, so that when we get a financial director in here, we are close to being current, and the financial director can focus on the budget, can focus on management reporting, but not have to concern him or herself with data entry and journal entries.
So Tim is acting as a consultant at this point, kind of a freelance consultant. Is that correct? Okay, so Tim has reconciled September, October, November, December, correct? Okay, how long did it take him? Yeah, so in general, how long does it take him to reconcile one month?
I asked Christy and Tim this today from like where we are at this moment in time, how realistic would it be to get us current given we find ourselves? And Christy said if she could work uninterrupted on nothing but bank recs, she thinks she could probably get it achieved within like a month and a half to 2 months was her estimate.
So that's 2 months over. So it takes about a week and a half to do 1 month's reconciliation.
Yeah.
Okay, but for Tim as consultant, how long does it take him to do it?
See, this is the piece I don't quite know because the way Tim was doing it, he was relying on Julie to check some of the things that he was doing And then she would have to become free to do that. So there was
So there was a lag.
a
time.
little bit of lag, yeah. between-
Okay, so the point I really want to make is that, yes, bank reconciliations, if you remember kind of the fit that I threw in September 2023
Yep.
about the bank reconciliations, they're really very important. It's important for theft reasons, it's important for your budgetary reasons, it's important for the board to understand what's going on, it's important for finance to understand what's going on, and it's important for the residents to feel comfortable that their tax money is being managed correctly. So many reasons it's super important. But I will point out that 2022, the reason that the banks were, the reconciliations, part of the reason it was such a mess is because the chart of accounts was allowed to be changed. That changed, and that threw everything into chaos. Because now your chart of accounts being changed, it just doesn't happen. But the chart of accounts changed. And there were really good reasons why, but the board allowed it to happen. And that's part of the chaos that was created, is when the chart of accounts was allowed to be changed. Secondly, logic happened. Julie was up to date all by herself without a financial assistant until September 2025. And then she fell behind because of ORRs, and she was diverted away from her job, her principal job, to do things that were not her principal job. And so here we are in June 2026, and we're behind schedule. My contention is that as of April 2026, everything's changed. John is no longer the president of this board. And my sense is that things are calming down. And I don't know what ORRs are looking like recently. I don't know what's going on, but have things calmed down for you? It's a different.
It's a different dynamic.
There's a lag. There's a lag time. But I mean, do you feel like there's still incoming? You do? Okay. Because my feeling is that if we can use Tim to catch up on our bank recs and keep him as a consultant, then when we do get a treasurer in place and things are more calm, then the treasurer can focus on what the treasurer needs to focus on. And I think until we can come back to sort of our basis point, I think it's foolish to look at hiring another person to support the finance director. I do think that maybe down the line, we should look at a deputy director, deputy administrator. You know, we should look at something like that. But right now, we don't know what's going on with our money. And I don't think we should do that.
I think we need to get recommendations from, because I don't actually agree with you, Gloria, because you're the one who said back in 2022, we weren't doing it right.
Because of the chart of accounts being changed.
But it's like,
There's always
there's
something.
always something
But that was something that was
there.
that was intentionally done.
But again, there's just, anyway, I think we need recommendations from the staff.
Just to add on, I'm always just a little confused what the function and person can, because I just don't feel like it's our responsibility to get a full understanding of what staff is needed. I always thought that was just a function of personnel to work with Brian, to work with the board, and it's really just our job to say where we can find it in the budget. Staff that we need. So I'm with you, Liz. I feel like this is it's just been frustrating. But I guess we've always, with reconciliation though, Gloria, just the history of it, we've had times where this village has been fully staffed, things are running really smooth. And I'm just telling you, stuff will come up and the books are bad.
You
Each
were
account
former
is always,
weren't you?
but I'm not reconciling anything, but it's just Carla would have times where she would just be like in Koki that, hey, just, it's not always reconciled. We've had times where this village is just running so smooth. We have no staff issues. It's just, stuff happens. And I'm in general, I agree with the sentiment that we need to get caught up. I'm not dismissing that at all. All I'm saying is that I don't want to just like say this is such a major problem. We got to spend all this money to get to the point where we're all caught up with everything. And every single month we're going to have staff to reconcile all accounts. I don't think that that's where we have to be. My point is, I guess, is that I hope that the personnel committee is working with you, Brian, and that you are communicating with the board what staff we need to function properly. And then this committee can find a way to get it within the budget to pay that staff. It's just, obviously, we've had a lot.
But as treasurer,
Yeah.
you were a volunteer treasurer. You were treasurer, David
Yep.
Kinsey was treasurer. If it takes a month and a half to do the reconciliations, how were you doing that as a volunteer? Like, how many hours were you putting? I mean, it must have been
Oh,
like
it
a
was
full-time
nothing like that. I
job.
was just working, it's really just reviewing expenses. I mean, for us, it's just a volunteer treasurer. It wasn't. It was just really monitoring the expenditures, and it really was a good, and I still have faith in the board.
Kind of
There's
a
checks
support,
and
yeah.
checks and balances to really protect against embezzlement.
Right, the triangle
Things
fraud.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's really, at least when I was treasurer, just the
Yeah.
function that I had.
That makes a lot of sense.
But it was also getting an understanding, like we talked to Carla quite a bit and getting an understanding of what she was doing on kind of like a month-to-month basis and understanding like, hey, it's okay if there is a few months where maybe this account isn't fully reconciled up to this point. That I think that at least the board and me being just kind of an arm of the board,
Mhm.
that I think was a good and another kind of checks and balances process that we
Right,
had.
that makes a lot
that
of
we
sense,
may
but
not
we
have
don't
right
have
now.
that anymore. We don't have that anymore by design.
Yes.
So I wasn't thinking so much that this committee would be making personnel recommendations to Brian. I thought where we should be coming from is giving benchmark recommendations. What is the general time frame that we're expecting reconciliations to occur, financial reports to be delivered, and so on? And then leave to Brian and personnel and whoever to figure out what the staffing plan, what the process is to accomplish those benchmarks. And so that's the way I would propose we move forward, and I think that's what I would propose the board move forward in terms of thinking about this process.
So Mark, is this a priority for the board? And is this something I don't pay attention to board meetings in this few months, so I
It's
don't
my
know. if this
intention
is-
will be back on the agenda at the July meeting. My hope is the July meeting will have the Baker Tilly, the audited report, I hope will be available. It's not under our control. That's under Baker Tilly, but hopefully it'll be done. Our work is done. I don't know where they are. So Baker Tilly, and then the following along conversation to Baker Tilly would be the conversation we're having tonight, as well as the conversation about the 2027 budget, which we're already need to be putting that process in place. So what I'd like to do now, unless there's other pressing questions, to move on to the agenda, we've pretty much covered the 2025 audit, I think. Brian, is there anything more you want to say about that? No. So let's move on then to talk about the planning process, the planning cycle, right? So every year there's a cycle of financial planning that goes on, beginning with the 2020, beginning with the operating budget for the ensuing year. And that process generally begins around May, June, distributing year-to-date performance report, financial reports, and the prior year financial reports, the audited reports to staff, and so on. So that happens, and we develop that, and then fairly quickly thereafter, we begin the capital improvement plan. So this is not a budget, except with respect to the first year of the plan. So for 2020, as we produce the 2027 budget, they'll be working on the 27 through 31 5-year CIP. And once the 5-year CIP is approved, the first year of the CIP, 2027, will actually be incorporated and improved as part of the budget. So the budget begins the process and then the CIP follows quickly on its heels. And then, but the two are joined at the hip in the sense that that 27 approved capital plan needs to be part of the 27 budget. And then in addition to the operating budget, which is the operating plan and the capital budget, we also have a financial management plan. This is something we began just last year. We work with Ellers, the consulting firm Ellers, who has an existing model, and we work with them to develop the assumptions which drive performance. What that financial management plan, just to remind the committee, it consists of the budget, the one-year budget, plus their projections for operations for the ensuing 4 years. So normally we do only a single year budget. We don't do a 5-year budget. So we do our single year budget, and then Ellers, based on a set of assumptions, extrapolates out for the next 4 years. That becomes part of the operating plan. They also fold in the CIP so that 5 years of projects is incorporated in the plan. And that includes the financing of those projects. So what you see in the financial management plan is a comprehensive and complete picture of the finances of the village 5 years out. So it's an incredibly important planning device for us. So with that little introduction, Brian, would you just talk about where we are specifically with respect to the 2027 budget process?
Sure. So tomorrow morning, I will have my final staff meeting, monthly staff meeting with the department heads, and kind of briefing them throughout the beginning phases of this year. Usually I send the CIP to the department heads in April and give them a July due date for getting all of their updates to me for the new calendar year 2031. But of late, given the environment they're operating in with the rapid inflation and changes in costs, I've been asking them to reassess their other asks in the budget for the last or upcoming few years to just assure that the numbers that they have estimated for those purchased items that they're going to need to replace are staying true to the actual environment in which if they went out to purchase them, they find those costs to be. So it's taken on a little bit different life than other prior years with that in mind. But so once they get those documents to me, their requests for updates, requests for modifications, I will assemble the 2027 through 31 CIP. Usually that is brought to the board sometime in around August, September for approval. Mark is correct. It is a piece of the budget process overall. And usually once that has been approved, or usually once the department heads get their documents to me for the CIP, I switch gears and have them start focusing on their own departmental budgets for the new budget year. Now, the budgets have not changed much. We don't have a lot of flexibility. We're not gaining a lot of additional levy capacity. The budgets for departments haven't changed. So what I've usually instructed the department heads to do when assembling their budgets is take a look at the snapshot from the prior year's budget and reallocate to match where they feel like that money is best needed from last year's budget, but I don't give them new budgetary flexibilities of increase your budget by X%. I just have them work within the same parameters that the prior year's budget has been presented, but they have the abilities to maneuver things. And if they feel adamantly that there is a financial need to address something, that's when it starts to become a conversation piece in the bigger assembly of. But I put together the utility budgets. I will assemble the CIP into the budget, and some of the revenue figures are the variables that we get reports on from the state with regard to the different state shared revenue sources. And some of those numbers change from year to year. And that's what makes the budget a little difficult to predict and have in front of you all for every step of the process updates, because some of those numbers come in at varying points throughout the fall.
I have a question. This may be a minor issue, but in terms of revenue, we have all these little programs that theoretically should, Four Corners, the boat, the marina, all that kind of stuff. Do we budget for the staff's time, or is it just, are we just telling these committees to cover their costs? Because if I was on the board right now, I would tell all those committees, you budget to cover, and you budget in like at least 10% over what you think your costs are going to be to start paying for the village. I think we need to get some revenue.
Oh, you're suggesting instead of it being siloed, that they actually pay, the pool does already pay.
Yeah, but I mean,
Like 7.5%.
like I used to
It
do
does.
years, many
Yeah.
years ago, I did land rack. And all I did was try to cover
Right.
the cost of the staff.
Yeah.
But I never took into account, the fact that Public Works is taking care of that field, or that we're paying for that building, or, because no one ever told me to.
Right.
Well,
I don't think it's
all
done.
those costs are billed back to those funds. So waterfront, the pool, whatever,
They are
they're
not
getting
getting it.
administrative support and they're being charged for it.
So
They're getting
they are.
work support, they're being charged for it.
Land gets charged for administration.
There is a set percentage. I don't remember if it is 5 or possibly you're right. it's
No,
10%.
I
Yeah.
pulled.
No,
10%
but
out
I
of
think
thin air.
that sounds right.
So
there
so
is a
all the
built-in
different
cost.
funds are being billed for overtime, or for overtime.
Each program is supposed to have a set percent of what they budget for their operational costs to come back to the village for administering.
So it
The fact
does, or
that-
it's supposed to?
So it does.
It
Well,
does.
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe they all do.
Right. And historically, the pool, which is the biggest of
Right,
those
the biggest
funds, has been self-support. It's not only been able to pay all its expenses, but it's been able to pay the village rent for the use of the pool. It's been able to pay the administrative costs. Now, if the pool does a major capital program, they decide to renovate the facility, they try to make a major capital expenditure, then it's going to be much more dicey because the reserve was relatively small. But the goal has always been for these programs, waterfront, recreation, pool, to be self-sustaining, to be completely self-sustaining, except when they need to do major capital programs, in which case the village borrows the money because they don't have the financial strength to borrow the money, but then they are charged with paying the debt service on that borrowing.
So the $75,000 that was levied in 2025, the pool is paying the village for that 75,000 in excess of
That portion
7.5%.
of debt has been levied to that fund and they have to support the debt.
So
they have
that's
to-
in addition to the 7.5%.
Correct. And the problem is that they need to borrow $1 million or $2 million or $5
They
million. There's no way that fund can cover that. Not only can they not borrow $5 million, but they couldn't even service the debt on $5 million. So then the conversation will have to change. But
So
we're not
that's
there
already,
yet.
taken, I mean, I'm more looking at the waterfront and all that, I know that the pool is.
So that's where we are on that. And then Ellers comes in on the back end of this process of the CIP and the budget. They fold our budget into the financial management plan. They fold the CIP into the financial management plan. And then they suggest to the village, they recommend to the village what the assumption should be to drive the second and through 5 years of the budget. So we do the budget for 27, but they're the ones that come to us with the assumptions to drive the 28, 29, 30, and 31 budget, top line numbers. so that we have a fully integrated, comprehensive financial plan for the full 5 years. And so that's the process. Any questions, comments with respect to that before we move on to the progress report on the TID project? Kate, is there anything you want to add? I know it's always hard when you're participating hybrid and the rest of us are here. Okay, right. Let's go on then. Okay. Kate, you want to take over then and address the TID annual reporting and potential closing?
Sure. I believe this will be pretty quick unless we have questions and discussion. So historically, a lot of us know, but some of you are new. So I'll share that historically, the last 10 years, I think, or so, we've had a firm called Vandewalle and Associates doing an annual report for our TIDs, which have been in the packets. We've seen them. They're very good looking and great reports. Vandewalle also did the required reporting to the state every year for each of our 3 open TIF districts. The board decided in the May meeting to switch that work to Ellers for some good reasons. Vandewalle's done great work. Moving it to Ellers makes sense because Ellers is doing our financial management plan. And as our TIDs are approaching their the possibility of closure and then eventually the necessity of closure, that impacts our levy and our levy limits as well as our operating levy. So having the same firm do our TIF projections and our financial management plan makes a ton of sense. It's also just the lifestyle of a TIF district. As we approach the end, we're thinking about closure, and having a financial advisor doing that makes more sense. Where in the beginning of a TIF district, having a planning firm like Vandewalle and Associates made sense while we were projecting what sorts of development we'd want to see in the TIF districts. So we now have engaged with Ellers to do that reporting. We also, in that contract, have an agreement with Ellers to have them do the projections for the life of each of the 3 open TIF districts, which will get us a step closer to figuring out the sequence for when we want to close those. The sequence for when we want to close those depends on a number of factors that we've talked about over the last few months with this group. The possibility of donating TID revenue from TID 4 to TID 3 to accelerate the closure of TID 3 is a possibility that Ellers is looking at, or closing TID 4 as quickly as possible without a donation so that we can return the tax base from TID 4 back to the levy is another possibility. So Ellers is considering that as a part of the financial management plan update, and it'll all be in one projection now, which I think will be what this committee needs and the board needs to make decisions about those closures, and ultimately will be a really good reference for referendum discussions in the future.
Just to remind the committee, what started that whole conversation was the fact that we are very constrained on our operating budget because inflation has been running 3 to 4%, but the only way you can increase your levy limit is through net new construction. We don't have much net new construction. We don't expect any net new construction of any appreciable amount in the next couple of years. So we need to find a way to close the projected operating deficits. We've been doing that through the use of unassigned fund balance, in which we had a balance in excess of our stipulated range. So we essentially have a surplus in our unassigned fund balance. So it's not an immediate problem, but over time, the unassigned fund balance will shrink. In 2025, I think we counted on bringing down the unassigned fund balance by about $38,000 to close the projected deficit in 2025. We'll know when the Baker-Tilly report comes in exactly how much had to be drawn. from the unassigned fund balance in order to balance 25. In 2026, we projected $125,000 deficit. And again, we're planning to close that with the unassigned fund balance. We would still have an unassigned fund balance. If in fact it cost us $125,000 to do it, we'd still should have an unassigned fund balance above our target. So we're still okay, but at some point it will dip into our target range and potentially at some point go below it. And we've been working with Ellers to do some modeling of that to kind of help us assess when that point would come where we would start to dip below our range. As you heard from Brad in his presentation, that's one of the major metrics that the S&P looks at is the adequacy of the fund balance along with debt service coverage and a few other ratios and things. So that's why we're looking at TIDS. TIDS will not provide the full solution, right? It's a partial solution to the problem, but potentially combined with a referendum, it could get us out of the structural problem we have with operating deficits. Of course, net new construction would help as well, but that's down the road. So that's kind of where we are. Any other thoughts, Kate, on that subject of the TIDS? You're good? Anybody has questions on where we are on TIDS?
Do we know when we're gonna get information back from Ellers on? Because we've been talking about this for a while. Do we know when they're gonna get back to us and give us some actual information on closing them out, when?
They are working right now. We had a conference call, Kate, I, and Brian with Ariana, I don't know, a week or so ago, was it? And we talked about this. They are working right now to do the cash flow projections. You can't close the TIDS unless you know that the TID can pay off all its liabilities at the end of its life. You can't close a TID and let the creditors hold the bag. So sort of the first step in the process is getting to the point where we can say, yes, we're comfortable that the TIDS can extinguish their liabilities. The year in which that occurs, whether there's any prepayment penalties or other things we need to concern ourselves with when we close the TID prior to the end of its expected life. So that's going on right now. I'm hopeful that Ariana will have those cash flows soon, but I can't tell you the date. I don't remember, Kate, I don't know if you remember, or Brian, giving us a date at which that might happen.
I don't specifically remember a date, but I was putting out there the possibilities of having it come to either July or August for sure.
So when you're saying updating cash flows, Kate, what I'm understanding that to mean is they've taken the Vanderwall amortizations and they've updated the amortizations. Is that correct? For TID 3, 4, and 5?
Yeah.
And I'm looking here, but I recognize that I'm actually looking away from you. So it's a weird thing.
Yeah, I understand.
If I look over here, I'm talking to you.
It's okay.
No, I'm not talking.
Would you feel better if I responded to you looking this way?
You just give me back your head. This would be awesome. Actually, the mem shows. That's my French. So Ehlers has now updated the amortization tables for TID 3 and 4 and 5.
And that's not the only things they need to update. I mean, they're updating all the assumptions.
I understand it, but I
don't know
want to see
cash flow.
those things. So those have been updated.
That is what Ellers is working on. They will use different assumptions than
That's what
Vanderwall. So I think we'll see changes.
I'm excited about this. When do you think we're going to see this?
Well,
I guess we won't see it until the next finance meeting. I want to see it sooner.
I can't see it before they produce it.
Yeah.
Let's put it
what I heard is that she's working on it now in anticipation of it being ready alongside with the audit completion, that when the audit's completed and we have the audited unassigned fund balance, that can just be dropped in. Because that's part of the financial management plan, which the,
Yeah, that's
right,
fine.
yeah. So
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Awesome.
Then, can I ask a question about that, or is this
No,
out
go
of
ahead.
order? Okay, so very at the bottom of this page on, the preliminary analysis of the balance in the village's
Yep.
general fund, which I found to be very helpful. I really like this report. But at the bottom, it says BT, must be Baker Tilly, estimated 1.459 million UFB, which is the unassigned fund balance
Correct.
at 12/31/2025, which is high. I mean, but that would be a good thing.
Yeah, and the issue here is that I asked Brian to run for me the comparative revenues and expenses for 2025, the detailed report that showed me account by account, what was the actual, what was the prior year, what was the budget. And as I went through that, when I got to the funds to be transferred into the general fund to balance the 25 budget, the number was blank. Okay, which just says to me that Baker Tilly has not yet given us the adjusting entry for that number. So based on the total revenues and the total expenses for 2025 in the report, the difference, the gap seemed to be about, I think it was like 22,000. And yet our budget had it more like 37,000,
Okay, and
which
so,
is not at all surprising that there would be a difference. But until we get the Baker Tilly report, I don't know. So what I've done, and I'm responsible for these numbers, but obviously the only ones
Wait,
here
so,
that we can,
so you pulled together this spreadsheet?
I created this spreadsheet.
I would love it if people could start saying who wrote it, because I thought this was Brian Mooney.
No, Brian's too busy for this. I pulled this together. The only numbers here that are set in concrete is the first column, 2024. Okay, when you start getting into 2025, we had a budget, right? We've got a projection based on the preliminary numbers that I see from Baker Tilly's work thus far, and we will have an actual, which is blank, as soon as Baker Tilly delivers their report. Okay. And then the same thing with respect to 26, we have a budget, and hopefully we can start to work on projections for 2026. But I would be a little more comforted in making those projections if this backlog of information, accounting information for 2026 was entered into the system, and I could run the year-to-dates for 2026, so they would actually be more meaningful than they are right now. So, but this was try to keep an eye on the metrics that I really try to focus on is this unassigned fund balance, right? Our rainy day fund / working capital fund. That's a critical metric for us. The other is this debt service coverage, right? That Brad had in his presentation, right? That's that 25%, 15 to 25%. So I'm also trying to get a better handle on where we are on that number. And the other thing that Brad mentioned that we try to do in structuring our financings is the mill rate, the levy debt mill rate, right? So we don't go to a particular year, and if we don't issue any debt, then that debt mill, the debt that is assigned to the residents to pay as part of their property taxes, which is not constrained by levy limits, that could either drop significantly or increase significantly if we do a major borrowing. And we don't want to drive the residents crazy by having that number move up and down each year with no predictability. So we try to do, as Brad refers to, as some smoothing there, so that the adjustments are not all that great in any given year. So as we go forward, looking both at the financials as well as the potential financing itself, these metrics plus other metrics really come into play. And we just want to keep an eye on them. And that's why I've been anxious to get the Baker Tilly numbers to get ourselves up to date for 2026, so we can start to populate this spreadsheet with more certainty as to where things stand. And then Brad is in a better position when he makes the projections, that he's projecting from a point that we have more certainty than we do today. That's where I'm coming from on this. So I'll be updating this going forward as soon as I get the Baker Tilly stuff, as soon as we get some 2026 numbers in, and we'll keep an eye on it. And hopefully there will be other reports, the standard reports, comparative revenues and expenses and cash balances in the coming months as we work down the backlog data. That's that. Anything else before we turn to the next item on the agenda? So anything else on TID and early closures? Questions, comments? Seeing, hearing none, then let's move on then to discussion, possible action, Eller's financial management plan renewal contract. Brian, to you.
Yeah, through the conversation that Mark referenced, the three of us having with Ariana, she brought to our attention that it was time for us to take a look at the renewal contract for the financial management plan. The agreed upon fees and everything are highlighted on the last page of that document in alignment with our prior year's plan. It's just a
Yeah, it's page 28 in the packet. So these are less, it seems to me, than the initial cost we had to pay when they had to do all the additional setup of the model. But
True.
now we're in a maintenance mode on the model, so
That is correct.
the costs have come down, but they're not inconsiderable, but the costs have come down.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to accept the financial management plan renewal contract that we recommend that to the board.
So the motion is to recommend to the board acceptance of the proposed fee schedule for the financial management plan from Elwes. Is there a second?
I'll second it, but can I ask a
Thank
question?
you, Liz. Discussion?
I have a question.
Sure.
We are looking at this $10,000 fee, right? Is that what we're looking at? And then it says optional additions. Are we doing those too?
So,
Unless we
Well, yeah,
agree to
Jen-
it.
well,
Because this
okay, but what is,
proposal-
do we need to do this? What's the likelihood? That's my
Yeah.
question too. As far as, are we looking at really a $25,000 proposal of
Or
service we're gonna need? Or is it really the 10,000? And, because again, if we recommend this, I want to context to the board.
Yeah, I want to know what I just recommended.
So I'm recommending $10,000 because I have not heard a good case for, we need them to handle water utility, we need them to handle sewer utility, we need stormwater utility, or any additional scenarios. So what I have seen is the work that they have done so far for us for financial management plan. And my motion was to renew that contract.
Ron, you want to speak to the issue of why these additional, why the utilities need to be modeled as well? And
What do they need to be? I mean,
Well,
it's optional.
So here's where we are, and maybe the question needs to go back to Elders as to, do we have to definitively have this answer before signing, or can we possibly revisit this? They have not prepared last year's version of the financial management plan to include the utility estimates to date. So we are still due that from their last year's plan. So perhaps we are in a position right now where we can say we'd like to see the evidence to suggest to redo that, to see where things are. They haven't finished that yet.
Whoa, time out. So we hired them to do utility planning and they haven't done it?
From last year's, they have not gotten the utility portion to date. Yes.
But we also did not pay for it. I just want to be clear that we haven't paid for something we didn't get.
Well, it says right here, payment for services is only after completion.
Okay, I just want to make sure everyone understood that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it says right there.
We haven't
So
paid.
to me, we're renewing this $10,000, not these optional additions, but then what we have, look at the scam. You guys get this all the time? But to me, like if we were to, once they complete utility, for example, it would stand to reason, then they would come forward and say, okay, we did utility. Now you owe us this amount of money, and here's the renewal plan for the utility. Am I misunderstanding that?
No, potentially correct. Yeah, that is correct. We are in a spot where we felt like with the utilities at the time that we signed that contract, we were rebuilding them. We had initiated the full water rate case to go forward here in 2026, which was implemented in February for the village, the new rates. So we wanted to see where these utilities stood from a revenue and cash reserve standpoint, because we do have some big projects on the horizon that are going to require the utilities to pay their share of the portion.
So when did we hire them to do, what was the big inception date for hiring them for these utility funds?
Oh, goodness, I don't remember the, I think it was part of what we did the original.
Perhaps. So last year, early last year sometime?
Yeah, sometime.
Yeah, so I think the goal originally was, and my, still is to have a comprehensive financial management plan. In other words, to bring in all the funds that the village has, which includes not only the general fund and the pool and the debt service fund and the capital fund, but the TIDs as well as the utilities. So we have a holistic picture and projection of where the village's finances stand. So, I mean, that's where I was coming from. So now I think what happened before was with respect to the TIDs. The TIDs were not modeled by Ellers last year. Okay, that was only agreed to this year when we entered into the contract with them to do that modeling. So last year, they just took the Van der Waal projections and hard coded them in their financial model. Now they're actually being projected by Ellers within the model itself. So we can still have projections for the utilities, but the question is, where are those projections going to come from? Who's going to make those projections? And the village is not well staffed to project what the utilities are going to do over the next 5 years. I mean, Ellers is in a far better position than we are to develop the assumptions which should underpin those models. So if we don't accept that, incorporate those elements into the contract, then we're going to have to figure out another way to make those projections, because to me, we can't go without projections of where those utilities are going.
So the long and short of it is, you're saying it's 25,000.
Last year, I think was that.
Okay, but you're also saying that the motion that I made for 10,000 is erroneous. It should have been for 25,000.
No.
I mean,
Oh, because of the utility,
Yeah.
because of the addition of the other. Yeah, if we're going to include those utility modeling, yes, that's the price they're quoting for. Right? So, I mean, we can accept the 10,000, we could recommend accepting the 10,000, but then it just leaves the question, how are we going to get the utilities in the financial model? Because I do think that we need to have something
don't have
that's
the-
comprehensive.
do we have it in the financial model right now?
I don't know, because I haven't seen it.
Because we hired them to do the financial model at the same time as we hired them to do the utilities, correct?
Yes,
So we have 1 year of work with them, which by the way is great. You don't know this, but it is great. It is good. But if we've also hired them and not paid for them to do the utility funds because we wanted that dynamic information, we're not really getting what we asked for.
Maybe,
So what's the follow-up? Like when you,
maybe we need to go back, maybe we
What
need
did
to
you
go
say when you asked them about that?
Is there any harm,
The utilities,
is there any harm in just waiting until
that's what I,
accepting the 10,000? Wait till they come up with what they've already promised to do for the last year, then
give us an opportunity to review.
But nag them.
But nag them, because it's like, this is part of a package that we paid for.
Yeah, because
Or
it
we
doesn't,
didn't pay for it. I'm sorry, Kate Crowley. We didn't pay for it yet. But it's part of the package we
it's not good
to
optics.
get. And we got part of it, which was great, but it would have been more comprehensive and useful had it been complete. And so I think that does warrant a, hey, so what's up?
if you go back there, Ariana, and clarify that, that'd be great. So the motion on the table is to recommend, the base fee
That's
total.
right.
Kate's got.
Okay? Yes.
Just before we vote, I want to explain that I'm going to abstain because I collaborate with Ellers in my professional life. Just want to explain my abstention before I make it.
Thank you.
So do you have an explanation then why they haven't gotten
No,
around to doing what we asked?
You have a conflict of interest.
I don't. No, I don't have a conflict of interest. I'm not. They're not a client or anything. I just, want to be mindful of perceptions and whatnot.
Optics.
Optics matter.
Thank you.
We have a motion on the table. Any further discussion, or are we ready to vote on the motion?
And it is limited to $10,000. That was my
Yes,
intention.
and clarification. Got that in the minutes. Liz, did you have to? Okay.
Can we do roll call, please?
Sure, we can do roll call. Brian,
Right? Brett,
aye, yes.
Thomas? Liz,
Yes.
Sean? Yes. Gloria?
Yes.
Kate said she would stay, and then Mark.
yes. Motion passes. All right, let's move on to the last item on, like the last item, the agenda. But, item 12, discussion village overtime usage. Gloria, this is.
So this is something that came up in the last finance committee meeting, which was in March 2026. Let's look at overtime. And so as a committee, we agreed to, let's look at year 2025 because it gives you the beginning of the year, the end of the year, it's a complete year. So on page 29 of our package is year end 2023, year end 2025. And on page 30 is year to date as of May 2nd, 2026. So the reason we wanted to look at this is because obviously we're looking at revenues potentially through tax levy, potentially through closing TID, every year through tax levy. And we're looking at different ways to explore where can we get revenues. But another thing we're looking at is where can we cut expenses. And so overtime was something that we were looking at. So what I found this report to be really interesting. And the reason I found it interesting is because it really underscored not only some financial issues, but it also underscored, again, for me, morale issues, which is in the purview of the personnel committee. But even though I'm not on personnel committee, I do actually care about staff. I know it's weird, but I do. And so the morale issues, looking at the narrative of the overtime that our admin staff is putting in, and then looking at the overtime, and we're not having a lot of overtime in admin because many of those employees are exempt. What this report doesn't tell me that I would have loved for it to tell me is how many hours. I don't understand the second column, regular hours, pay code 1-00 hours. So I didn't really understand that, and maybe what I should do is go digging to understand that more. But I didn't understand the hours. So when overtime is being paid out, the most obvious outflow is the police department. And looking at the police department, there are questions that percolate for me that is possibly more appropriately handled in the Public Health and Safety Committee, possibly more appropriately handled in the Personnel Committee. But I don't know that to date, those committees are asking these questions. And when I see $60,000 of overtime for year 2025, I'm seeing another employee. Should we be hiring somebody else so that nobody has to work overtime? But if we're making a decision to allocate to overtime, are we allocating to overtime correctly? Now, definition of correctly, in my mind, on finance, is to the cheapest employee possible. But that's, again, getting into employment and supervisors and decisions made within the department that isn't really my job here on finance committee. But I think my job on finance committee is to say, hey, I think this report should be conferred or recommended to be looked at by public health and safety. Ask those questions because that's the committee that works most closely with the police department. I also think this report should be possibly allocated over to personnel to ask about how is the overtime being allocated? Because as a member of finance, I think $61,000 in overtime for last year is a lot. And if I look at the two employees that in the police department that had the most overtime, what I see gets back to the morale issue. And look at the admin person who was making just shy of 85,000, but actually made less than the two employees that were supposed to be making less than 75,000 because of overtime. And that goes to morale. When presumably the admin person was working overtime and didn't get that. I understand the exempt and non-exempt, and I'm babbling a little bit. But then you look at page 30 for year-to-date as of May 2nd, and you see that same employee in the admin department already had made less than that one employee in the police department, even though their wages were structured such that person should have been paid more. And I think that it's an issue. I think this should be referred to personnel to look at from a morale perspective. I also think it should be referred to public health and safety so that committee can better understand the mechanics about how overtime is being applied within the police department.
Okay. Well, there was no reason why you can't ask to appear before those two committees.
So would I be
Benjamin?
appearing in front of those two committees as the finance committee to represent the finance committee? Or can we, as a finance committee, motion that this move over for consideration in those two committees?
Well, we can make whatever motion we want, but we'll up to those committees whether they want to take it up or not. I mean, we can't control that. Right? So I don't know what personnel or public safety and health, what their agendas look like. But this is something, I think the issue probably should be raised with the chairs of those committees first, informally, and find out, is this something that they would be willing to undertake? Rather than us making a formal recommendation, let's first find out from those committee chairs whether this is something that they would be willing to pursue.
And so if the answer is no,
Well, you can make a motion, I suppose, although this is on the agenda for discussion only, so I'm not sure that we can have a formal
no, it's
vote.
not. It's
But there's
it's
nothing,
actually discussion and possible action. I specifically asked for possible action to allow this committee to make a decision.
it got listed on the agenda for discussion only, so that may be an oversight, but that's it. But there's no reason why you can't.
I put
Either-
that in the
either Brian
email. I
can-
put that in the email to you that was forwarded to Brian Mooney that it should be discussion and possible action, and I specifically said why I wanted to be possible action, so that it wouldn't limit this committee from making a motion.
I'll go forward. I'll ask the two committee chairs to take it. I will. I'll make sure that they get that message to them. Don't worry about that.
Let's move on. Future agenda items, there's a list there. Anyone wish to add anything to that list?
Now that Marilyn Townsend is not on this committee, what is going to happen with status report on Garden Homes development?
Frankly, I don't think wouldn't be my intention to take it up because the issue's already been referred to the planning commission at the last board meeting. They referred the issue of garden homes to the plan commission. So that's where that discussion is going to take place. So I don't see that as being a relevant issue at this point, nor the closing of the books on University Avenue. It's not something I would anticipate taking up soon. I think Liz's item, review of utility finances, as soon as we get the 2025 report from Baker Tilly, we can start getting into that. But I think we need the numbers before we do that.
So help me remember, what is closing of the books on University Avenue mean?
That's the University Avenue project. So
The corridor?
the corridor project. So he was just looking, I think, for what the final accounts for that was. There was estimates, and the Madison would bill us from time to time for that
Gotcha.
work, and he was just waiting for Madison to say the billing's all in, it's done,
So is it
and the
done?
final tab for the village is X.
So that's still an open item.
As far as I know, unless you've heard something different.
The last I've heard from Madison on that is that they're confident we are almost to the finish line. But every time I hear that, a random bill shows up,
Future items. For a village overtime review, I would like that to be on next month's agenda, please. Like, I'd like to have an update on what happened with the different chairs of those committees. And I'd like it on as a discussion and possible action next month. Not that there will be a possible action, but I don't want to be hamstrung again.
Understood. Anything new to be added to that? So, yeah, I discussed tonight with you some of the things that I'm planning to bring back to the committee in July. This whole issue of the staffing and benchmarking in terms of financial reporting and in terms of bank reconciliations and all that sort of thing. And obviously, we'll continue to work our way through the budget process. Baker Tilly, like to bring the 25 results, the audit results to the committee. I'm not sure what we'll do if they bring it to the board. Maybe we'll have a joint meeting of the board and the finance committee when Baker Tilly actually presents that information to the board. I suppose we could have our own separate meeting with Baker Tilly. Some additional cost associated with that. I'm not sure it'd be worthwhile. I think we just do it in one shot. They present it to the board. We're in attendance. We can ask our questions as well as the board asks its questions. And then if there's follow-up work with Baker Tilly, we'll deal with that. But that's definitely something that will appear on the agenda as soon as it becomes available. And I'm not sure anything else, Brian, that you see. I think the focus right now is the budget and staffing and doing what we can to reduce or eliminate the backlog.
Mark, I do have one other agenda, and maybe it's not something. When Sharon was here, she wanted to redo the policies. We got partway through it, and then it went nowhere. So at some point, I mean, we didn't We do. So I'm assuming that the policies that were in place
There's still,
are still in place.
We
And
made some
there was some,
tweaks,
there
but
was some minutes, but
Right.
some of them. were
well,
not.
we made some to like credit card or some kind of other,
Right.
but not the big
right,
one. Are we ever gonna do, I mean,
yeah,
I mean,
think it's-
I understand that that's not a high level thing right now,
Yeah.
given everything else that's done there, but.
I appreciate that point of view, and yeah, I think at some point this
Mhm.
committee ought to put its own stamp on the financial policy, which largely has been unchanged for more than a decade, and do a comprehensive review. But I have a hard time prioritizing it
Right
over
now,
all the other issues we discussed tonight and the issues that we will face going forward, at least in the very near future. I'm like leaving it on the agenda, as a future agenda item.
yeah, I would just put it on at some point.
Yeah.
When are we meeting again?
That's the next thing I want to talk about. I think it'd be a lot better, easier for Brian if we could move our meetings up, if that would be convenient to other for members of the committee. Our standard time is the fourth Monday of the month at 7 o'clock.
So when
I
you're saying,
personally think
I-
that meeting a week prior to the board makes more sense.
And we could do that too. I'm perfectly willing to do that if ever. So like, that would mean like the second Monday, unless the board meets the third Tuesday of the month, is that right? So,
Plan
but-
commission would be the second.
right. But the Monday, the second Monday, would that be a possibility, or even the third Monday, although that puts you under the gun? If you've got a board meeting the following day, which is gonna make that a little tough. So the second Monday?
I can check. I don't know if there's a conflict that evening, but I'll check that.
Okay, but do members have conflicts if we changed it to, say, 5:30 rather than a 7 o'clock time? And potentially move the meeting up in front of the board meeting?
Well, if we do on the 21st, if we do finance same day as board, then that,
That would be a special because of the Baker Tilly thing. I wouldn't suggest that we meet this. In fact, I couldn't, and Brian couldn't, and Kate couldn't.
right,
We
that's a
can't meet
lot
when the
of,
board meets.
yeah. No, I'm saying we can't meet, I don't think it's prudent to meet the same day as the board as a habit.
No, we wouldn't. This would just be a special session because of and we would meet together jointly with the board so that we could partake in the Baker Tilly audit report examination presentation.
You think that'll be done on the 21st?
I hope so. I really
I would
hope
be
so.
open to that.
Because we can't, the longer that gets put off, the more questions we can't answer. But, so, like, take the deafening silence to mean that the board would be, the committee would be receptive to moving let's just deal with the hour first, and moving it up to 5:30, would that be acceptable all around? Okay, so we'll go with we'll go with 5:30, and Brian, you'll look into the available
I'll
dates,
send
and maybe we'll do a doodle poll to figure out what that new standard date will be. But I want there to be something in your calendar that says every month, this date, this time is set aside for the finance committee.
So what happened last month?
What happened last month? Well, last month, we didn't have, we had severe staffing issues. and
So, but no notice was sent out to anyone, at least not to me. I'm not gonna speak for everyone. But I didn't receive any notice of a cancellation. And the month prior to that, I learned from Marilyn Townsend that we would have a finance committee.
I will work with Brian on that. We will get better at setting
So
up.
Brian would both have said that
cancellation
cancellation if
notices.
he didn't.
I don't remember.
Because I
whether anything was
feel like
sent out
that's,
or not.
yeah, nothing was sent out from you to me.
There should be.
Yes, I
We'll
agree.
all agree with that. So we will meet at 5:30. We will suggest a date, a regular date to do that going forward. If for any reason that date doesn't work out, there's some conflict for whatever reason, we'll notify the committee that can't meet on that particular date and try to either skip that meeting or to arrange an alternative date.
That would take effect after the next meeting.
Um,
Or we talk about.
potentially the next meeting in July, we might want to meet twice in July. I think we're probably going to need to, if the members are amenable. One's to meet jointly with the board on the third Tuesday, hopefully with Baker Tilly on the agenda, and then our own meeting, which would hopefully be at this new date and time that we will try to arrange in the next couple of days.
I hate to be a bearer of bad news. I think that might interfere with my scheduled vacation in July, but I'll check all that. then.
You're going on
Yeah,
vacation.
yeah, I know.
That's funny.
I was just gonna mention that I'll be out of town too for about the 17th of July until the weekend for the next meeting, so.
Well, we will try to
Earlier,
establish
I
a
could do.
regular date, and if we have to have special dates in addition to the board meeting in July, we will let you know. Brian will look through his schedule and make sure that we,
It's just really hard to plan because, for example, last month in May, I heard you were in Japan. And so I assumed, okay, finance must be canceled. But it's really hard to plan, even knowing that there was a meeting this week, that I'd heard that maybe it was going to go virtual. And I reached out to you with this information for OT, asking it to be discussion of possible action, not knowing if it's just going to be virtual or if we're even going to have a meeting. And so if we don't know if we're going to have a meeting, how do we know when to get materials into Brian so that it's not at the last minute and it's right before a paid holiday and everybody's seated their pants? We can't plan if we don't know if there's going to be a meeting. And recently it seems sort of, maybe we will, probably we won't. And I don't think that's up right.
it could be on the Fred.
I had an item for possible future agenda. I'm not sure, but given the staffing problems, I don't know. But I noticed the mayor of Madison has asked staff to try to identify cuts in the next budget of 1% or more. And I think we should, at some point in the process, we ought to be thinking about asking staff to identify cuts. It may not be now, given the current situation. But, at least might identify some options we'll look at. That we could look at, or to look at.
Yeah, and I expect the 2027 budget to be on our agenda every month until the budget is approved by the board. So it will be there and will be discussed and I assume that one of the things that will go on the 27th at the next board meeting will be the issue of what the assumption should be for the 27 budget. In other words, if the board has any guidance, give to the staff in advance of the preparation of the budget, that would be the time, right? So, and you may want to reach out to Ariana and find out what other communities are doing in terms of baseline assumptions with respect to things like wages and the like.
Madison sent an email out inviting the public to weigh in on budget priorities.
And it'll, as I say, I think that item should be on the board's agenda in July.
But
And so
possibly we
the
could put that
public
out
will-
to our residents.
They will all know what the board agenda is. All right. Are we done? I think we are. Is there a motion to adjourn? Liz?
So moved.
And
Second.
it was said,
All right.
Gotcha.
All in favor, say aye. All right, motion carried. Thank you so much for coming out
Take
tonight.
care.
Bye, everyone.
Long meeting.
Okay.
that meeting in July, I am hoping that we get to, that Baker Tilly gets to present first. So that
Yes.
so that
Yeah.
our committee doesn't, in which case, that is not the meeting